So, to date, we have looked at a few different things in our solar system. We first started to talk about the concept of the universe and how it came to be with the Big Bang. And then we started looking specifically at our solar system. So, we've looked at the planets that exist in our solar system, some of the moons, we've noted them. We've looked specifically at our moon that orbits Earth, and we've talked about the phases of the moon. And so, other than the sun, planets, and the moon, what other objects are found in our solar system? So, in this lesson, we're going to be comparing comets, meteors, and asteroids as we find these items throughout our solar system. So, take a second here and pause the video. And I want you to read each of these sentences and then consider what kind of structure is that. So here's an example. Its structure is considered to be like a large, dirty snowball. Would that be a comet, a meteor, or an asteroid? It is made up of dust and rock that burn up in the Earth's atmosphere. Is that a comet, a meteor, or an asteroid? So pause the video, and you don't need to write these down, but just read the sentence and consider which of those terms you feel applies to that characteristic. When you're done, press play. So let's look at comets first. And here is an animated view of a comet. Okay, so it does look like a large, dirty snowball. Okay, that is the characteristic of comets as they fly through the Earth. And they are composed of dust and rock mixed with frozen water, methane, which is a gas, and ammonia, which is also a gas. And they're considered to look, as we said, like a large, dirty snowball. So they tend to be white. They tend to have a white light coming off of them, a tail, as they hurl through space. Comets travel around the sun in elliptical orbits. So very similar to planets. Planets circle around the sun in elliptical orbits, somewhat elliptical orbits. Comets' orbits are much more elliptical, meaning that they're more oval, but they do travel around the sun. When they come near the sun, some of it melts. So remember, some of that comet is made out of ice. So it's really cold, but the sun is really hot. So the sun will melt some of that ice. And then when that happens, it forms a long tail because the gases in that comet are vaporized by the sun. So remember, there's liquid, there would be water, there's solid water in terms of ice, but there were gases like methane and ammonia. And so they are actually vaporized by the sun. And that's why you see a tail forming from a comet. When it moves further away from the sun, the tail disappears. And that's because it's not as hot near the sun. And so those gases aren't being vaporized. So you don't see the tail. But the comet is still moving very fast and moving in an elliptical orbit. After the comet has passed close to the sun many times, it breaks apart. Okay, and that makes sense. The sun is vaporizing the components of the comet. It's not going to last forever. And little pieces come out and they spread apart. These pieces of dust and rock from the comet are called meteoroids. Okay, so the comet is the larger of the two, and then meteoroids come next. So you may have noticed that in that last slide, we used the term meteoroids, but one of the questions that we asked were about meteors. So what is the difference? So we need to go through the difference in these terms. So there is also a meteorite. So there's meteoroids, meteors, and meteorites, and they're all the same piece of rock, just they're different in terms of where the rock is located. So if this is the Earth's surface down here, and you have this image in your note, if the chunk of rock actually lands on the ground or on the surface of the Earth, we call that a meteorite. If the chunk of rock has made it through the Earth's atmosphere, we call it a meteor. And if that chunk of rock from the comet, remember that they originate from the comet, is just floating around in space, but it's smaller and it's derived from the comet, we call it a meteoroid. Okay, so meteoroids out in space, meteors make it through Earth's atmosphere. And they burn up because as they pass through Earth's atmosphere, they're passing through a lot of gases. And it's getting a little bit warmer in terms of friction, right, as they pass through all these gases. So a lot of times they burn up, but if they actually make it to Earth's surface, we call it a meteorite. So you can pause the video here if you need to, and you can fill in these definitions on your note. A meteor is considered harmless, even though it can be viewed from Earth at times. So lots of times we have meteor showers. They'll announce that on the news and on weather channels. And it's kind of a neat thing. You get to see shooting stars, right? That's what a meteor is what we term a shooting star. And remember that the meteor is made itself through the Earth's atmosphere, but oftentimes it does not make it all the way to Earth as a meteorite. So now let's last talk about asteroids. So asteroids are pieces of rock similar to the material that formed into planets. Asteroids are smaller than a planet, but they are larger than a meteoroid, and often they are larger than a comet, obviously, because remember that a meteoroid comes off of a comet. So there's lots of, talk sometimes about asteroids hitting the Earth and, wiping out Earth or parts of the Earth. And we know when asteroids are expected to come near Earth, and we can predict their pattern. So most asteroids are located in an area between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter, which is called the asteroid belt. So why do you think that they are there? And they are. There's a big ring of asteroid rocks that exist between Mars and Jupiter. And why are they located there? Well, you might remember from our work on the solar system and the planets, Mars is the last of the first 4 planets that are made out of rock. Jupiter is the first of the last 4 planets made out of gases. So after Mars, any remaining rocky items, they did not become a planet, they exist as these asteroids, and they hang out there between Mars and Jupiter. They believe that the gravity of Jupiter might have kept a planet from actually forming in the area. So they think that these asteroids could have come together and formed their own planet, but because Jupiter is so massive and its gravity is so huge that these chunks of rock and these asteroids actually were more attracted, to the orbit of Jupiter than to each other and never did form a planet. So here's Jupiter, and here is the asteroid belt. They're not showing Mars in this picture, but Mars would be, on the other side, probably in here somewhere. It looks like this is a bit of a circle. There's Jupiter on the outside. So Mars would be somewhere over here, and these chunks of rock just float around. So again, just to recap the different space rocks that we have, a comet is out there, and it's a chunk of ice and rock originating from the outer solar system, accompanied by, they call a comma or a tail. Okay, because again, as it comes near the sun, those gases and the ice that are inside that comet burn up, and you see light produced. An asteroid is just a chunk of rock, generally between Mars and Jupiter. And sometimes those asteroids do come towards Earth, but very rarely. A meteoroid is derived from a comet. So when the comet burns up, pieces of the comet will start floating around. They're smaller, okay? And then if they make it through Earth's atmosphere right here, we call that a meteor, and we also call that a shooting star. And if that meteor is big enough and Earth's atmosphere doesn't burn it up and it makes it to the ground, we call that a meteorite. So is this a comet, a meteor, or an asteroid? And explain how you know. So take a look at these 3 pictures, and then you should know by now the difference between those 3. And then lastly, just to test your knowledge, you can look at these questions again, and now you should be able to answer whether they are a comet, a meteor, or an asteroid. This is a good video. We're going to link this onto Google Classroom, and you can watch it there.